26-19, Colorado loses to Oregon State. Their losing streak is now at 3 games, and they fall below 500 for the first time this season. The 26-19 score makes the game seem closer than it really was. Colorado really couldn't generate anything offensively through the first 3.5 quarters of this game. Shedeur Sanders, clearly, as we knew coming into this game, injured, and didn't get much better throughout the game. I'm sure he was shot up before the game. Coach Prime alluded to the fact that he was shot up at halftime, no confirmation there, but we do know for sure in the fourth quarter he was shot up again, so I'm guessing 3 times. What we learned about Colorado tonight is they have a lot of problems that they're having trouble solving, at least offensively. Now defensively, they're starting to pick things up, and they have strung together several really strong efforts last week at UCLA and today, of course, against Oregon State. The defense kept Colorado in both of those football games just waiting for some sort of offensive support, and they didn't get any. Now, Coach Prime and the coaching staff, they tried to mix things up this week to generate a spark offensively, to change maybe some of the things they were doing, and the play caller for this evening was shifted, right? Sean Lewis has been the offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach, play caller. That was changed this week, we found out, and Pat Shurmur, former NFL head coach, former offensive coordinator for many, many years, was calling the plays tonight, and unfortunately, it just didn't translate or yield results. I thought the script was better coming out to start this game. It was that 3rd and 2, the mesh concept there on that play call, and Shedeur takes a shot and they get off the field. Otherwise, I thought Colorado had some really good momentum. They were running the ball a little bit early, and then it all just kind of regressed. And to what we've seen, the better part of the last 5 weeks or so, this Buffs team has some issues right now. And clearly when Shedeur isn't 100% and isn't himself, this team doesn't have a chance to win. And I thought more than just the physical, mentally, it wasn't just Shedeur offensively, but I thought he was a little checked out. He just wasn't himself mentally, up until the point where he went back into the locker room, then came back out, clearly got shot back up, came back out. At that stage, I was really surprised they put him back into the game, because they had already started to make some defensive substitutions. They changed some things defensively and put some second teamers out there. And then Shedeur came back out from the locker room. It looked like there was a moment where he had to convince everybody that, no, I'm good to go back in. At that stage, Colorado's down 23-5. He'd been beat up, but it wasn't to the level that it was last week at UCLA, but he got drilled hard a couple of times. In fact, the hit that he took before he went back into the locker room, I said, there's no way they put him back out there. And then he got hit a couple of more times when he came back out, but he was pissed off. I think the first play, there was a miscommunication, and he comes to the sideline yelling at Sean Lewis, and then the next play there's a false start penalty. I think it was a legal snap was the penalty, rather. There was just some miscommunication on the cadence, and Caleb Mathis jumped off. Shedeur goes over to him and is screaming at him. The next play, they snap the ball. It's almost a strip sack, and Shedeur gets hit from behind and his arm gets knocked. He gets back up and takes a swing at the Oregon State defensive lineman. I'm stunned there wasn't a penalty called, but he was clearly frustrated. He was clearly pissed off. And then he led the team down the field for their first touchdown of the game. At that stage, after, I was stunned that they even let him back in the game. Shedeur mentioned something in the post-game press conference, and we learned something about him tonight. He's a warrior, this kid. He's been taking a real beating this year, and he keeps popping right back up. He had every reason not to come back into the game. And in fact, from a coaching staff perspective, I think it probably would have been the wise decision not to put him back in the game, because you have 3 games left, and without him, you don't have a chance. They know that. That's why he went back into the game after he came back out of the locker room. So, I think you can make some criticism there one way or another, but I don't think he would have taken no for an answer. And you could say, okay, the coach has got to, have his players' best interest at heart, but Prime wasn't going to take him out if he felt like he was good to go, and he came back in, and Colorado generated a little bit of momentum, but it was too little, too late. And if that's what it takes, and after the game, he was asked about the difference between earlier in the game and that moment, and he said, I was just mad, and if that's the type of dude he is when he's mad, somebody ought to piss him off before next week's game at Arizona State. Right before they come out of the locker room, somebody should say something ignorant. Get him mad, because Shedeur mad, I mean, Shador Matt is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Unfortunately, you shouldn't have to have it get there. You would hope that you could, string together some offensive continuity throughout the course of the game. But look, I digress. Colorado didn't run the football, even with Pat Shurmur. They finished with 11 carries, the same total as last week at UCLA. They're too one-dimensional. Formationally, it's just so obvious what they're trying to run. So it's a little embarrassing. They lose the numbers game at the line of scrimmage on every third down. And in fact, the first time out in the first half tonight on third down, had they not taken that timeout, Shador would have gotten killed, because I think it was 7-5. Oregon State had a +2 advantage, numbers-wise there on the third down. It's partially because Colorado doesn't have a tight end that they can put on the end of the line and help out a tackle. But even still, they got to figure out a way to protect better than that on third down, because every single snap this offense runs is out of shotgun. There's no pistol, there's nothing under center. Every single snap is out of shotgun. There's only so much you can do out of the same formation. Teams are going to scout. I got to imagine the Buffs are a really easy scout right now. I do. I think that maybe you probably threw off Oregon State because you changed play callers, but it's not like the offensive system was changed. Now, I thought Shurmur had more play action. There was some stuff where they were moving the pocket tonight, but it just stopped. And then they got back to the same stuff over and over and over again. It was a little confusing. Coach Prime in the postgame was saying that we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, so we're just on the outside of the house, and he's got tinted windows, and we're making judgments about what he should do without having all the information. Part of that is his choice not to allow us a little bit more detail behind the scenes, but he doesn't need to. So yeah, it's kind of part of our job is to figure things out, and we're going off of the information that we have, and the information that we had is that the offense needed a spark, right? And so they made the change to play caller, but Prime seemed to convey that it was about much more than the play calling, why that change was made. There was a moment, I believe, before the game where Sean Lewis was out on the field like 20 minutes ahead of the team, is what I was told, and down at this end of the field by himself up until the point Ralphie came out. So I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I've never pretended to know what's going on behind the scenes. I thought the move to Pat Shurmur was a good one. The reason why I say that is I thought they needed to mix things up. Now, we've had our criticisms of Sean Lewis in this offense. It did not change. There's an identity problem here, and it starts with how Coach Prime wants to play it. You can't run the ball 11 times in a football game and expect to beat good teams. Even if you almost came back, it was still 26-19. You never had time to come back anyway. So there is, philosophically, at least for next year, some huge changes that need to be made. I understand the air raid offense, but if you run one formation, two formations, like if you're constantly in shotgun the entire game and you don't have a running game, you don't have the line to support it, and up until the last 2 weeks, they didn't have the defense to support it, but the defense has really showed up the last 2 weeks, despite the fact that there have been some really short possessions offensively for Colorado. They've been keeping, this team in games the last 2 weeks at least, and they generated more turnovers tonight. It was a dead giveaway that this game wasn't going to go the way they wanted when Shiloh Sanders forced the fumble, unlike, Oregon State's own 20-yard line, and Colorado only got 3 out of that drive. They had to have 7. And then the sequence at the end of the half, Coach Prime was saying that the thought process was they were going to try and get a first down. They were going to try and, at least get something out of that drive. Well, the first play call was a halfback screen to the short side of the field in your own end zone. That was an awful play call. It really was. I mean, you'll take anything, man. A slant, you'll take anything just to get out of the end zone, but to call a play and that needs so much time to develop when you can't block anybody, it's just a bad idea. And then they ran the ball twice, punted the ball back to Oregon State. Not a great punt, but at the same time, Vassett's in jail punting from his own end zone. Oregon State with a nice punt return, and then one play, Uiagalelei hits his man for a touchdown, and it's 14-3, and you're just sitting there going, what? Look, I understand being desperate. I understand trying to get a spark and generate things, but that was a bad decision. Prime knew it, and he justified it to us after the game and explained his approach, which I really appreciated, by the way, because he didn't have to. But, you know, he also knew that he'd be criticized for it. And then at the end of the game, he said there was a miscommunication with the officials and the timeouts. Look, they were never really going to come back into that game. Somebody texted me and said, why didn't they onside there? Because you onside kick, the game is over right there. They don't have the kickers to do that. They had all 3 timeouts. I'd much rather them just boot the ball away and try and get a stop, because the defense was the best part of the team all night long. Unfortunately, they couldn't, and they never got the ball back. But again, the chances of winning in that moment were very small. Look, there's some problems here offensively. Well, let me say this. Do I think that they're going to get better these next 3 games? No. Coach Prime in the post-game press conference was talking about passion. He needs to find the passion again in his team. I asked Shedeur about it, and he said, I'm not really going to say one way or another whether or not I think he's right on the whole passion aspect, because I'm a part of the team. You know, if I do that, I call my teammates out. Shedeur also said in the post-game presser, when he was asked about was there any thought about not returning to this game, he said, what kind of man would that make me, to leave us hanging, leave 80 of us out there hanging? I respect it. I do. It's a toughness, it's a warrior mentality. Unfortunately, he just wasn't sharp tonight in general, but he was hurt, right? And I thought mentally just not all that dialed in at the beginning of this game. His touch was off on his passes. He missed Monday and Tuesday and Sunday. Normally has Sundays off, but missed Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, got back to practice Wednesday. He's clearly injured. And I'll tell you something else. When he got up to leave the post-game press conference, the kid could barely walk. So you've got one more home game next week against Arizona, who, hammered UCLA tonight, I believe. So that's a totally different ball game than you would have thought it was at the beginning of the year. Clearly, Jed Fish has that program humming right now. And then you finish the season on the road at Washington State and on the road at Utah. Those are going to be brutal games, especially considering the fact that Washington State is struggling right now. They lost to Stanford tonight, which Colorado lost to Stanford, but I digress. They lost to Stanford tonight, and that's a team that is going to be looking at Colorado and licking their chops in a couple of weeks. So it doesn't get easier from here is basically what I'm trying to say. And at the bye week, the one goal that I had for this team is just don't go winless, because then you lose a lot of momentum and you end the season on just, a down note, and you don't want to do that. And this was a huge night for recruiting. They had tons of recruits in, including the #1 offensive tackle in the country. It was a really poor display considering, unfortunately, and obviously it's not your main motivation. Your main motivation is to get a win, but not a great impression. I mean, yes, you showed some recruits that you have holes, and certainly some playing time is available, but Coach Prime's going to have to work his magic, because if you finish the year 0-6, I think it's going to cause some recruits some second thoughts. I do. And it's also the fact that there have been some serious struggles offensively, and this was a team that started the year as dynamic as just about anybody in the country offensively. So the question why is a good one. Part of it is because they've been solved. They still can't run the football, and they don't really make an effort to. I think there was one series where they ran the ball on 1st and 2nd down, and I think it might have been the first series out of the locker room. They ran the ball on 1st down with Savion Wilkerson. I think it was a 6-yard gain. Then they ran the ball on 2nd down and got tackled in the backfield. They don't commit to the running game. There's zero of that, zero commitment. There's no interest to commit to the running game. But there's also a situation where, okay, you run the ball on 1st down, you get 5 yards, then you get tackled in the backfield. Well, you're not going to run the ball on 3rd and 6. And not that I'm advocating for that, but then to come back the next drive, you don't do it, and then there's penalties and sacks. Take a sack on 1st down, now it's 2nd and 15. Don't really want to run there. And they tried to once tonight, but at the end of the day, they had 11 carries, even though the game was mostly within reach for the better part of the first 3.5 quarters. Still could have run the ball plenty of times and taken some of the pressure off of Shedeur. Credit to the offensive line, who got dragged through the mud by Prime, by everybody nationally last week. They stepped up. I thought they were a little bit better. I mean, eventually it just starts to cave in because Colorado doesn't do anything differently. There's not enough variety. There's not enough adjustments. Tonight's game I thought was pretty poorly coached overall, unfortunately. And even more poorly played by this offense. Defensively, they did a great job. They're getting just about as much as you're going to get out of this defense. And Prime was saying, there's just one or two plays. At the end of the game, the last 2 weeks, the thing is you're getting no offensive support. So eventually, this defense that probably shouldn't even be hanging in there as long as they have the last 2 weeks, they give you all you could get, but you're getting nothing from your offense, and that's a huge concern. It's a major red flag. Prime doesn't know, right? I mean, nobody, I think, really has it figured out yet. I would love to see them at some point these last 3 games legitimately try to run the football. Legitimate. Really. And next week against Arizona, I don't know that they're going to have a choice. Shadur's not going to be 100% by Saturday. That I promise. And they're going to have to shoot him up again just to play. So if you continue to come out and rely on the kid who's banged up, you don't do anything third down wise to help him out because you don't have the personnel to do so, and then you don't do anything formationally because it's kind of late in the year to start changing up a bunch of stuff. So I don't know how this gets better. I don't. And the preseason expectation of 4 to 5 wins looks pretty damn spot on right now. I mean, unfortunately, it does. Now, the way they played the beginning of the year, the field goal post move, you said you should be able to get to 6. And had they capitalized on a few of the opportunities, Stanford, USC, even last week at UCLA, I thought they had a chance if they would have run the football a little bit more, but there was a path to bowl eligibility. I don't want to say it's gone because anything could happen, but I'd be stunned if they got there. And right now, I'd be pretty stunned if they won one more game. The vibes aren't good right now. They were flat tonight. I don't think that 8:40 kickoff helped either, but they were just flat offensively. Defensively, they were fine. I thought they did enough to be opportunistic, got hats on footballs, generated a couple of fumbles. Cameron Silman-Craig, I think, had an interception that he probably should have had, maybe 2. But either way, just wasn't their night. Hasn't been their back half of the season. And I sympathize because they're trying to do things and to mix things up, but they're not trying enough. They're not. They're doing way too much of the stuff that has been an issue for them this season. Sitting in 5 wide, they don't really have a tight end that they trust to protect, so they don't even put him on the field. And after the game, I asked Coach Prime specifically about situationally on third down. It seems like you're losing the numbers game every single snap, which they are. And he said at that stage, he'd rather have another receiver out there instead of a blocker. I guess if you had 5 linemen that could hold up. So I'm just going to disagree with his philosophy there. And look, that's Deion Sanders, so I'm sure I'm the one in the wrong. At the end of the day, I think I said during the game that there's something bad in the water right now, and Prime's point about the lack of passion, that's something. And maybe that's what he feels it is. It might be. Because it might be. Because that confidence that they had to start the TCU game, to play against Nebraska, it was all new, early season, a lot of excitement. But that passion is not here anymore. So maybe that is it. And I thought it was confidence a little bit, but maybe it is just passion to get wins, to do this job. And you were going to play against better competition down the stretch. So you had to tighten things up to that point. And unfortunately, the Travis Hunter injury, I think, rocked this team a lot early in the year. He's just one of their biggest leaders. When you got Travis on the field, your confidence level as a team changes, right? Because, all right, we may be struggling in this area or that area, but at least we got that. At least we got 12 out here with us. At least we got that dude out here with us. So, look, Prime was really upset, and he says he's struggling right now because he's never had to deal with this before. And Shadur also alluded to much of the same, that he's never had to do this before, where I'm talking about losing. But I think we knew that was going to arrive eventually, and hopefully they can make enough corrections in the offseason to kind of change some of the things that I hope that they've learned as in you need to be two-dimensional. 11 carries for running backs isn't trying to run the football. That's 2 straight weeks. You had 22 carries by running backs the last 2 weeks. It's just too easy to figure you out. And part of that is protection, and part of it is scheme, and part of it is personnel, but there's a lot of stuff that needs to be cleaned up, and Prime knows that as well. I don't know how many more cards you have left to play. You already switched up play caller. I don't really, and he basically alluded to the fact that that is a permanent change, at least the rest of this year. We'll see how that goes. I imagine someone's going to come poach Sean Lewis in the offseason, if Prime even wants him back at this stage. So, and he's going to take a lot of heat on that one from a lot of people around the country. You know, Broncos fans are going to have a real hard time separating the Pat Shurmur thing, but Sean Lewis called the plays last week, and it was damn near the same offense. So put it on Shurmur if you want to. There were a couple of bad play calls tonight. You know, there were, but it wasn't like they weren't last week, and this was the first game that Shurmur's called since 2021. So, in the first college game he's called, gosh, I mean, I don't even know if he ever called plays in college before. The last time he worked at college was 25 years. He might have. I'd have to go back and look, but that's, again, 25 years ago at the earliest. So, I find myself now at this moment being more and more familiar with what's happening, because this is the Colorado football that a lot of us have been used to. Self-inflicted mistakes, mental errors, just not having enough to finish a season strong. In fact, in my time around this program, they've only ever once finished a season, and that was in 2016. And even in 2016, they were just way too banged up, at least at the, you know, they got Utah that year, and they won the Pac-12 South. But after that, they were too banged up for the Pac-12 Championship and the Alamo Bowl. Unfortunately, it really doesn't feel like a bowl game is in the cards this year, which is a real bummer, but it doesn't take away from, you know, just how different things are around here compared to what they used to be. You had a full house tonight. I figured, actually, that a lot of people would have left at halftime, but they were here. It's a nice night. It's gorgeous tonight. It sucks. Just sucks that this game didn't kick off at 2 o'clock and kicked off at 8:40. That's the last one of those, I think that's the last one of those. I don't think we've gotten a kick time for Washington State yet, but that's hopefully the last one of those the rest of the year, and maybe for a very long time for this program. So, a disappointing night, poorly coached, and Prime owned that, offensively for sure. Defensively, I thought they did some nice things. It was almost a damn near carbon copy of last week's game, is what it felt like to me. So, I sit here looking for more things to say, but it was basic. Oh, here's another thing. Xavier Weaver got benched to start this game. He didn't play the first 2 drives. I know that they want to reward guys for having good weeks of practice, unless it was a situation that Xavier was hurt and they were hoping they didn't have to use him, which I doubt it was. I don't care if someone has a good week at practice. That dude has done enough to have earned a starting spot. I thought that was a little embarrassing. I did. If that was just because of practice this week, which I don't know, that didn't get asked. I'll ask on Tuesday, but that's wrong. Didn't matter, but that's wrong. Yeah, not a good night for this program once again, and sets up the final 3 games. There's 3 football games left, and Shedeur is going to be very banged up, presumably for all of them. Presumably for the rest. It's not like he's going to get better. So we'll see how it works out. I mean, if you don't compete with Arizona here next weekend, the final 2 on the road could be very rough. I hope not, but they could be. I'd also, as I said, at some point this year, would love to see them just try to run the ball. And at this point, saying no, we're not going to do that, seems silly to me, because you keep trying it this way and it's flat out not working. There was a lot of play action, but, you know, how much is play action really going to work if you don't establish a ground game? So you got a one-dimensional offense. You're trying to pull the right strings to get this thing ironed out, but feels like there's just not a lot of threads left to yank at, unfortunately. So the Buffs lose 26-19, the 3rd in a row, 4-5 on the season, below 500 for the first time. And they've got to regroup before Senior Day next Saturday against Arizona, noon kickoff on Pac-12 Network. I think the country's probably done with watching the Buffs offense, at least. They've had 2 really good slots the last 2 weeks, and they have not shown up offensively. And it's hurting a few of their guys, I think, nationally, their reputation. So Travis Hunter, 8 balls, I think 98 yards, a touchdown at the end of the game. He was okay defensively. There was a lot of zone, and they send a lot of blitz where they're in zone on the back side. And I feel like that's just too easy to beat because you just sit down. But again, defensively, I thought there were some good things that they did tonight, certainly. And the only reason they were in this football game was because of their defense. So one more week here at Folsom Field, and then it's on to Pullman and Salt Lake over Thanksgiving. So until Saturday, thanks for watching.